Good morning! Yes, the beard's gone, but don't worry, it'll come back eventually. I've actually recorded several vlogs over the last week or so, about 3 of them. I've edited them together, put them together, and ultimately decided not to post them each time. Why? Because after rewatching them, I felt like they're just a bit too personal, right? And ultimately, probably not the best thing to put out there. I was a little insecure about them, I guess. But the thing is, and here's a little bit of a controversial point you probably won't see all that often, your insecurities are valid. At least to a certain degree. Let's talk about that. Welcome to your Morning Schmiel. It's your Morning Schmiel, boo doo 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 doo. Good day! Yeah! Now I know the common advice, the common refrain is that insecurities are something to ignore and just something to push past. Because a lot of times they do hold us back, but oftentimes those insecurities are actually grounded in some truth, right? Maybe you're afraid of talking to your friends about your problems because you don't want to bring them down and make them not like you, right? Maybe you're afraid you don't have enough talent. Maybe you're afraid you're being too bossy or something like that. Maybe you're afraid that if you gush about something you love, people will think you're weird. And I gotta say, it's a very sad, crushing moment to realize and experience when that insecurity actually being true. Because it can happen, right? If you're depressed and all you talk about is being depressed, and you keep hammering that home, it's all you talk about, and every time you have a conversation with someone, it can get to the point where they might not want to talk to you anymore. It can bring people down. That's a real thing. And it's not because they're bad people, and it's not because they're bad friends. People just have a limited endurance for that kind of conversation. People are just human, right? And there's a tendency to want to judge that person as a bad friend, but that emotional exhaustion is real. But the thing is, that does not mean you shouldn't talk about being depressed with your friends. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about your issues. Because yes, people can become exhausted if that's all you talk about. But the truth is, many people can stomach a few conversations about that. And really, saying you should stomach isn't really the right word for it. A lot of people actively want to talk about, the things that are bothering you. People do care. There's just a limit. It's one thing to talk about being depressed sometimes. It's another thing to only talk about being depressed. And, that can happen. And it's understandable, because when you're depressed, that's what's on your mind. If you're feeling shitty all the time, it's natural to talk about feeling shitty all the time. The thing is to not do it too much, right? Which can be a kind of a frustrating thing to hear, but it's the truth of it. You can burn people out. But people do want to help you, and people do care about you, and people do want to talk to you about these things. You just have to be aware that there's a limit, and you have to recognize when you're approaching that limit. The most important thing, though, is to not let that insecurity keep you from never doing it. You have to be brave. That's what's important. Your insecurities are real, they are grounded in something, but you can't let that keep you from trying to hit that mystical middle ground, or you engage your issues in a healthy way without reaching that limit that burns people out. You have to still try. You have to be brave. If you're trying to make some new friends or you got a job interview coming up, you might say the wrong thing, but you still have to try. It's still good to be aware and have your sense of judgment going on in the background about, maybe you shouldn't say that, maybe you should say this, but you still have to try. But that insecurity is valid. That could be a thing. If you talk about the things you love, it's possible that you can talk about it so much that it dominates the conversation and people think this is your only thing and that you can't have a conversation about anything else. That's a thing. But the thing is, you don't have to go that hard on it, right? You can still, that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about the things you love. You just have to be aware that that is a possibility and gauge and balance the conversation. You have to be aware of the ledge. That's all. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about the things you love. When people tell you not to worry about your insecurities, they want you to push past them. They want them to not be barriers to limit you, and there is validity in that. But it is a bit of a lie to say that your insecurities are completely teethless, that they are harmless, that they don't exist. They're trying to give you that courage you need, but it's also good to be aware of the ledge that you're running towards. And that can be a difficult thing to balance. That can be a difficult thing to navigate. The most important thing is to be brave and to still try. But I don't know. It feels like a lie to pretend it feels like a lie to pretend that there is no danger at all. And I can tell you from personal experience, it can be a very, very crushing feeling and a very scary thing. Just a very sad thing to see that, to experience your insecurities actually being right. But be brave. Your fear is real. But what's important, but the proper response to fear isn't to let yourself become paralyzed. It's to be brave. Be brave. It's the only real option. Oh, and sometimes those insecurities are less about finding a middle ground and they're more about being afraid of what the possible consequences may be. Right? In that case, those consequences may be real. But what's important is that if an action is going to have consequences, it's important that you have a reasonable understanding of what those consequences are and that you factor that into your choice. And so that when you make that choice, that's what might happen and that you are okay with that. That ultimately, what you gain is worth that loss. What's important is that you're making an informed decision here. And what's important is that when it comes time to make that decision, and that if you have decided that is the right decision for you, that you have the courage to make that decision. Right? Because sometimes the consequences might not be worth it. Maybe you really shouldn't say that. But when the times that you should and that is worth it, that's when it's important to be brave. And how do you know what the difference between being reckless and being brave is? Do your best. But even then you have to be brave. You might not be making the right decision, but you still need to have the courage to make the best one that you can. See you tomorrow.